In a world where magic suddenly spawned dungeons, demons, and chaos, that same magic also created awakeners, humans blessed with absurdly broken powers. And standing at the very top of that food chain was a squad facing the triple S rank 5-element demon Lord Bellefor. And this squad wasn't just confident. They knew they were built different, calling themselves God's Legion, the strongest awakener team in existence. With their captain, Elias B., calmly introducing himself as a man who had led this unit for 10 straight years like a veteran raid leader who never wipes. Just as countless demons began flooding the battlefield because their so-called mission was to cleanse this dungeon for the supreme rulers, the gods, prompting Elias Spy to instantly leap forward with his sword and command the squad to move out. Casually mentioning this was only their Huntile dungeon run, like it was another Monday. While Orion, the L-rank lightning shadow dancer assassin, acknowledged the order with professional coolness and the unspoken fact that this extermination mission was labeled rank for a reason. Okay, only monsters survive. As a Sky, the young prodigy mage and rank cloud spellcaster activated his spell Glacial Whirl with the enthusiasm of someone who thought this fight was still mid, not endgame. While Lucian, the support commander, followed up with Starfall Gravity Pole, boosting allied strength by 200% and crushing the enemy with gravity multiplied 100 times, turning the battlefield into a physics violation compilation until Elias himself activated Annihilation, landing like a walking nuke and erasing everything behind him in one clean sweep, officially cementing why he was known as an L rank. And just like that, the supposedly terrifying trip shrank demon Lord Bellefor was declared terminated. Sky complaining that the fight ended too fast and Orion teasing about dungeon hopping dates. While Lucian pointed out that this mission felt suspiciously easy despite the highest danger rating, which Elias by quietly agreed with, mentioning Intel had warned of Bellefor's hidden scale and 5-element mastery before Orion shamelessly hugged him, pressing far too close and whispering about vacations, and maybe just the two of them, only for Elias by to panic reject with the emotional intelligence of a brick and insist on a group dinner at the usual holy capital spot, causing Orion to internally rage quit as Sky bluntly called him clueless until Elias Spy suddenly noticed someone missing and asked about that guy with Lucian mentioning he was supposedly handling cleanup, prompting Orion to complain that Sky was always late, which immediately aged poorly because Sky appeared out of nowhere in full swagger mode, snapped his fingers, declared the extermination mission initiated, raised a single finger, and in the next instant, the spellcaster's head was pierced clean through from behind, causing Elias by to spin around in pure rage as Orion and Lucian froze in shock while Sky calmly revealed that this betrayal was his real mission from the gods, explaining that Elias by couldn't move because paralytic powder had been slipped into his breakfast for an entire month, like the slowest, pettiest assassination prep ever. Followed by Sky activating the god-tier skill flower of Forbidden Entanglement, a broken ability that bypassed all defenses and consciousness, ensnaring them instantly as he casually admitted the rank extermination mission was never about the Demon Lord. It was always about killing God's Legion, after which Orion and Lucian were impaled to the torso by flower tentacles, dying right in front of Elias by as he screamed in fury, demanding to know which god gave them the right when God's Legion had never crossed any line, only for Sky to kneel mockingly and call Elias by naive before standing and stabbing straight through his stomach, stating coldly that gods never needed reasons, shattering Elias by further when he questioned their 10 years together as brothers, only to be told it was all a game from the start and there were nothing but pawns. After which Sky finished him off by blasting his head, officially ending the entire God Extermination squad on May 22nd, 2125, declaring the rank extermination mission complete and joking about finally taking that vacation. Except Elias by story didn't end there because as his consciousness lingered, he heard a voice offering a deal. And when he came to, he found himself shackled inside a strange realm where Bellefor appeared very much alive and unapologetic, revealing that a true triple S-rank demon lord doesn't die that easily, and that his hidden skill, life regression, could send Elias Spy back into the past to fix everything. Sensing the hatred burning inside him and offering one clean redo, which Elias B accepted without hesitation after reliving the deaths of his teammates and swearing to kill Sky and every god involved, causing Bellefor to grin and sweeten the deal with a mysterious heart as a signing bonus. Though, when Elias questioned the cost, everything went black. And the next thing he heard was someone shouting his name as he woke up in the year 21105 inside the Awakener Academy Middle School in Vessel State, Sandhaven, staring at his smaller hands in disbelief as he realized he had returned to a time before even awakening, whispering in shock that he was truly back. Back at school, Reality immediately slapped Elias in the face when Miss Huang absolutely lost it, shouting that fooling around in class was one thing, but passing out right before the awakening ceremony was next-level nonsense. Ordering him to get to the back of the classroom and stand there like a grounded NPC while Elias Spy quietly apologized and stared at his own hands, internally spiraling as he realized he was genuinely back in middle school, thinking this had to be Bellyager's doing and that the whole situation was completely unhinged because these classmates around him were people he hadn't seen in over 20 years, making the classroom feel like a cursed throwback episode as Miss Wong clapped her hands and dragged everyone back to the lesson, explaining that 5 elemental forces existed in this world: lightning, flower, cloud, nuclear, and stellar, and that each person could only wield one, casually flexing her rare cloud element to remind everyone she was still built different. Before explaining that based on how an element bonded with the body, awakeners were categorized into combat, utility, or special types, which was how countless classes existed. Even name-dropping the school's top guild squad, like a proud coach hyping her varsity team, while also reminding the students that out of billions of people, just having awakening potential already put them in the top fraction of humanity, but then dropping the real bomb that today was the day everything would be locked in forever. Since awakening classes, nearly 100 of them were ranked into green, red, and gold tiers. And everyone only got one single shot, meaning whatever they awakened as that afternoon would define their entire life trajectory. No patches, no re-rolls, no refunds, which Elias listened to with laser focus, thinking this was literally the start of everything for him as he wandered the school halls and suddenly saw a familiar scene unfold when a skinny kid nicknamed Four Eyes got shoved to the ground by a group of troublemaker with Magnus Hung, an E-rank stellar assassin with sketchy background and massive ego, mocking him for needing external help to awaken and crushing his hand while calling him cannon fodder compared to a red-tier awakener like himself, causing Elias Spy to instantly recognize him as that same jerk from his past life. Remembering how Magnus was always causing problems and somehow never getting expelled while Four Eyes panicked and handed over cash, making Magnus grin like he just won a loot drop until Miss Wong showed up and called him out for shaking students down on school property, only for Magnus to flip the situation, claim Four Eyes hurt his crew, and casually disrespect Miss Wong too. Her face before walking off with fake politeness, which made Elias Spy step forward instinctively and block Magnus' path, only to it shoved aside and told to move before they came back to watch everyone fail their awakenings. After which, Elias Spy apologized to Miss Hong, thinking to himself that she always talked tough, but had a genuinely good heart since she had helped him more times than he could count in his previous life. And before he could think further, an announcement rang out calling her class to the awakening chamber, prompting her to warn everyone to keep their heads straight inside to avoid getting hurt. While Elias Spy mentally reviewed the 2 ways people awakened in this world. Natural awakening triggered by intense emotions for those with talent and physique like Magnus, and artificial awakening through the awakening chamber. Peak human engineering designed to spike emotions and adrenaline until the body snapped into awakening, which was exactly why it worked. As the first student stepped inside and awakened as a nuclear mage, proudly announcing he got a blue-tier elite class, earning praise and a break from Miss Hong, reinforcing Elias Spy's thought that awakening was humanity's one true lottery ticket to rewrite destiny until his name was called, and he stepped forward receiving a rare serious reminder from Miss Wong to focus for once, which he acknowledged firmly, thinking back to how in his last life he had awakened as an E-rank nuclear warrior. Green tier common, mediocre at best, bullied endlessly, and only unlocked his rare crest form much later after hitting S rank and wonder whether his body still leaned toward nuclear this time. But the moment he entered the chamber, alarms went wild. The machine began malfunctioning, and the system detected 5 elemental affinities inside his body at once, causing Elias Spy to panic internally and question why his body felt like it was about to explode. Right before a system notification appeared in his consciousness, announcing that the Infinite Awakening system had officially come online. The moment the Infinite Awakening system came online, a translucent screen unfolded in front of Elias Spy, displaying all 5 elements, lightning and stellar, each sitting cleanly at 0 out of 10,000, making it painfully clear that his body now housed every element at once. And the system calmly informed him that he could choose any element to start with, accumulate elemental energy over time, either unlock a random new class within that element or level up an existing one, which made Elias Spy internally lose his mind as he realized this wasn't just a role, but an entire progression exploit. Mumbling in disbelief about an element accumulator while staring at the screen and understanding that this meant he could eventually unlock green, blue, red, gold, every tier imaginable, even the ultra-rare special classes. People only whispered about, though. The system quickly clarified that while the starter choice was as everything afterward would be random, making Elias by immediately think back to Belphegor and connect the dots that this had to be the demon lord's so-called signing bonus as power surged through his body, and the system warned him that selecting a starter class would reset all elemental meters, prompting Elias Spy to smile faintly and make his choice without hesitation, even as students outside grew impatient, and teachers wondered what was taking so long until Elias Spy finally stepped out and calmly announced that he had awakened as a nuclear warrior. Green Tier, rock bottom, sounding apologetic on the surface while quietly smiling to himself, causing Miss Wong to gently comfort him with a speech about how many Green Tier awakeners had gone on to do incredible things if they didn't give up, insisting the world rewarded effort, even if Elias Spy clearly didn't need the pep talk. But before the moment could settle, Magnus barged in, laughing like he just heard the joke of the century, mocking the teacher's encouragement and loudly declaring that Green Tier meant being a nobody forever, ranting about how gods played favorites, winners got everything. A word that instantly triggered something dark in Elias Spy as Magnus continued spewing his philosophy about power, fairness, and destiny, claiming Green Tier awakeners were destined to be glorified janitors while the strong hoarded resources and grew even stronger, openly insulting both Elias Spy and Miss Wong by calling her dead weight collecting a government paycheck before telling Elias Spy to go home and stop wasting taxpayer money, which was the exact moment Elias Spy calmly dumped an entire cup of cold drink straight on a Magnus' face, prompting Magnus to explode in rage and charge his power, activating a stellar boosted assassin strike and lunging forward only for Elias Spy to raise his hand and block the punch dead on opposite to everyone present as Elias Spy instantly followed up by drawing his basic Green Tier light sword and executing a flawless parry into a counter slash that sent Magnus flying across the floor like trash being taken out coughing blood as the room fell silent. Students frozen in disbelief and teachers stunned while Elias Spy coolly remarked that he had chosen this class for a reason, explaining that his weapon came with modest stats but perfect balance, and that this kind of combat felt like second nature to him. As Magnus staggered back to his feet, screaming that it was just luck and boasting about his rare red tier assassin class, while Miss Wong realized with growing horror that what she just witnessed wasn't luck at all, but a near-perfect execution of an advanced warrior technique parry, a move requiring precision within a 0.09 to 0.92 second window that even veteran awakeners failed to master after years, making her question how a student who had awakened minutes ago could pull it off flawlessly until Magnus drew his red tier assassin dagger, its stats boosting his attack and speed, and threatened to make Elias Spy gravel in front of everyone, while Elias Spy simply stood there smiling, thinking to himself that choosing what looked like the weakest class was intentional, because judging people by how they're born and deciding their fate before they even start was the real fatal mistake, one everyone like Magnus would only realize far too late. As he calmly faced him head-on, completely unfazed, the entire campus atmosphere flipped as students began whispering like they were watching forbidden DLC content unlock in real time, with some panicking that using awakened powers on school grounds was strictly against the rules, especially with this many witnesses, while others nervously pointed out that Magnus' dad was a high-ranking official and his uncle was literally the school's disciplinary dean, whereas Elias Spy had zero backing, zero money, and zero plot armor on paper, meaning if he fought back, expulsion was basically guaranteed, which made the teachers panic as Miss Huang rushed between them, desperately reminding both that they had just awakened and could end up fighting side by side on a battlefield someday, urging them not to do anything stupid, only for Magnus to snap back that she had to be joking, claiming Elias Spy had picked the fight, and that even begging wouldn't save him now, because he was about to show everyone the unbridgeable gap between chosen and bottom-tier trash, all while smiling like a villain who thought he'd already won. As Miss Wong internally calculated just how screwed Elias Spy really was, knowing that class quality determined starting multipliers, Elias Spy was a level 1 E-rank nuclear warrior with a green tier 100% stat multiplier and only basic skills like block and dash, while Magnus was a level 1 E-rank stellar assassin with a red tier 200% multiplier and skills like backstab and berserk, meaning his raw stats were literally double, and that gap was supposed to be permanent, making the onlookers quietly conclude that Elias Spy was doomed from every possible angle. Since in a brutal world like this, the smart move was usually to dodge troublemakers, swallow pride, eat the humiliation, and survive. But Elias Spy wasn't playing that game because Magnus activated Berserk, buffing his stats even further and charging in, prompting Miss Wong to shout for Elias Spy to watch out as she realized there was no way he could block something that fast and that strong. while Magnus assumed Elias would try to parry again and burn through stamina. But Elias Spy's thoughts were calm and razor-sharp as he decided dodging was pointless and instead activated his dash skill, instantly boosting his speed by 50%, pushing it past the threshold where dash evolved into a blink-like phase shift that let him slip straight through Magnus' attack, leaving Magnus stunned as Elias reappeared behind him and struck mid-movement, tearing open his defenses and carving blood before Magnus even processed what happened, collapsing in pain as Elias coldly thought that trash belonged in the garbage while the crowd exploded in confusion. Some insisting Magnus must have tripped, others claiming he knocked himself out. Even Four Eyes silently celebrating because it looked like Magnus lost without Elias by technically doing anything illegal. And even Miss Huang admitting she couldn't clearly see the exchange. Though one sharp-eyed student, the class rep, Scarlet, realized the truth, recognizing that Elias Spy had chained fundamental warrior skills at an absurd level, triggering dash at the perfect moment, exploiting positioning, and landing a surgical strike without blatantly violating school rules. Meaning this wasn't luck at all, but mastery so deep it looked invisible, which made her realize that Elias wasn't just skilled, he was applying high-level combat instinctively, like breathing. While students whispered in disbelief about how embarrassing Magnus looked. And in that same moment, Elias received system notifications confirming he'd gained class experience and stellar element points for defeating an E-rank enemy, immediately deducing that combat ranked up classes and elemental kills granted element points too. Though he scoffed at the measly numbers and mentally planned to grind dungeons nonstop, knowing Nuclear Warrior truly became broken after class advancement, unlocking skill books that blew other classes out of the water. And that this time he needed to grow far faster than in his previous life. But just as he was thinking ahead, Magnus staggered up again, gripping his dagger and launching a blind attack from behind, only to be stopped cold by a commanding voice as the disciplinary dean arrived and shut it down, humiliating Magnus further by asking if he hadn't embarrassed himself enough for one day, dismissing the crowd and ordering everyone to go home for the weekend and tell their families about their awakenings. While Elias suddenly froze as a realization slammed into him. Awakening Day, May 22nd, 21105 wasn't just important because of his rebirth. Something catastrophic had happened on this exact date in his previous life. Something he absolutely could not let happen again. And while the dean tried calling out to him, Elias bolted without explanation, sprinting full speed as the dean waved it off and let the matter slide. Later in the office, Magnus was raging about losing due to luck, only for the dean to shut him down by explaining that what Elias Spy had done wasn't luck at all, but near-perfect execution of advanced fundamentals even veterans couldn't replicate. Comparing the fight to a professional, humiliating, and overgeared amateur, warning Magnus that Elias was nothing like he thought. While far away, Elias Spy ran until his lungs burned, staring at a familiar building from his past, panting heavily as memories flooded back. He had to stop what was about to happen next, because this moment was the true turning point. On May 22nd, 21105, at exactly 6 p.m., the living room TV buzzed in the background as Elias B's father laughed loudly at some dumb show, while his mother quietly washed utensils nearby. In a moment Elias stepped inside, this painfully familiar place hit him like a memory landmine. Because this was his home, and his father casually remarked that he was back unusually early. But the second Elias saw his mother, something inside him cracked as she smiled gently, unaware that in another life she hadn't survived this day the same way, making Elias think with genuine relief that she was still alive, still standing there, using sign language to tell him she'd made his favorite cottage noodles, only for Elias to insist almost desperately that he wanted pickled fish today, not tomorrow. Pushing her to go buy it right now, despite her playful scolding who snapped that she could handle it alone and accused Elias of ignoring him, reminding him that today was Awakening Day and demanding to hear the good news, standing up with authority and expectation, because this man Leon was a C-rank level 26 lightning warrior with a terrifying 400% attribute multiplier, someone who had clawed his way up from nothing and expected his son to reflect that success, only for Elias to quietly say he hadn't awakened yet, which instantly set off alarms as Luke mocked him, comparing him to the neighbor's kid who'd awakened Blue Tear, calling them a matching pair of losers, and ranting about how Elias Spy should have at least gotten red since Luke and himself had done it without any advantages, claiming he'd sacrificed everything for this moment before unleashing his aura and demanding to know the truth, prompting Elias to release his own energy and admit he'd awakened Green Tear, which caused Lucan to snap completely, smashing a bottle over Elias B's head and screaming about embarrassment and disgrace, beating him like a punching bag while Elias realized with bitter clarity that his father wasn't just an awakener. He was a violent one, the kind who couldn't control his rage. And as the blows landed, Elias Spy remembered exactly what had happened on this day in his previous life. How Lucan had gone berserk upon learning he was Green Tear. How his mother had tried to protect him by placing herself between them like she always did. And how Elias had been too weak and terrified to stop it. Watching helplessly as Lucan beat her for nearly an hour, shattering her leg and smashing her head so badly that she'd never fully recovered mentally, leaving Elias by sobbing beside her as guilt ate him alive for years afterward. And now in the present, as Lucan continued beating him, Elias Spy realized that while nuclear warriors possessed uniquely broken abilities, he had just awakened and was still stuck at rock bottom, a rank with none of those advantages unlocked yet. While Lucan's character panel flashed in his mind, overwhelming stats, red tier class, making it painfully obvious that even if Elias Spy had awakened gold tier today, he still wouldn't be able to beat him right now. And when Lucan grabbed him by the hair and ranted about regret and anger, Elias Spy understood something critical. His father had come home early specifically for this confrontation, and meaning it wouldn't end until someone broke. And that meant Elias B absolutely couldn't let his mother be here when things escalated, forcing himself to endure the beating just long enough to make sure she stayed away, thinking grimly that at least he'd succeeded in getting her out of the house, only for fate to twist the knife as the door suddenly opened. And his mother returned, grocery bags slipping from her hands in shock, revealing that she'd rushed back early because she didn't want her son to go hungry. While outside, she'd been worrying about him the entire time. Him and Lucan turned toward her with a cruel grin, mocking her for coming back to see what kind of worthless trash she'd given him. As Elias's heart dropped, realizing that despite everything, despite the rebirth, the power, the second chance, this moment had arrived again. And if he didn't change it now, history would repeat itself all over again. As Elias Spy stood there bleeding, memories from his previous life crashed back into him, remembering a conversation he'd once had in prison on death row, where another inmate had asked in disbelief how he became the first green tier awakener in history to ever advance, since advancement normally required at least blue quality and a rank. And yet Elias B had jumped straight from green to platinum, a literal 1 INA million anomaly, before bluntly asking what crime could possibly land someone like that on death row. To which Elias B had answered coldly that the bastard deserved it for beating his mother to death. And now, in the present, that same rage exploded as Elias Spy lunged at his father without hesitation, only to be swatted away effortlessly like he weighed nothing, smashing into furniture as blood spilled and his body screamed in pain, making him realize that even without skills, awakened fighters were leagues above normal people, and that hits like these would kill ordinary humans instantly. Yet he forced himself to stand back up, trembling but unbroken, only for his mother to rush in front of him instinctively just as his father slammed the door shut and turned on her, ranting that when he first found out she was pregnant, he had been overjoyed because he thought he finally had a shot at elevating their family status, dragging a chair across the floor while screaming that his useless brothers couldn't even produce sons and that the family's future rested solely on his shoulders, advancing toward her as she shook in fear and blaming her worthless genes for giving birth to a trash green tier awakener who couldn't even advance, lifting the chair with murderous intent. But in that exact instant, Elias Spy activated blink and vanished, reappearing directly in front of his mother and deflecting the strike, sending his father crashing backward. As Elias Spy stood there, shielding her and warning him not to touch her, slicing his father's sleeve just enough to draw blood, which only made the man laugh in excitement, mocking Elias Spy for thinking he'd grown up and declaring it perfect as he cracked his knuckles. While Elias B steadied himself with an energy-forged sword in hand, knowing he needed to buy time no matter what, bracing as his father attacked again. And Elias B attempted to parry, only for the defense to shatter instantly under the overwhelming force. The impact blasting through him and making him cough blood as he realized firsthand what a massive level gap truly felt like. Ribs screaming like they were about to snap, yet still refusing to fall as his father activated Black Thunderstrike, sneering that it was time for Elias Spy to learn respect, hammering him relentlessly while mocking his so-called awakening and calling him a foolish kid who didn't know his place, telling him that with a garbage dead in class, he was basically asking to be beaten to death. But Elias Spy swore internally that history would not repeat itself. And when his father grabbed another chair and mocked him for thinking power made him somebody, Elias B's mother instinctively covered him with her body, trembling and begging silently as his father shouted about who truly ruled the house, raising the chair high until suddenly violent pounding shook the door and a voice outside yelled for it to be opened, making Elias B's heart race as he recognized this moment while his father cursed and stormed toward the door, yanking it open to find two men standing there. Inspection Team Deputy Captain Gavin Lee, an A-rank Divine Class Awakener, and Investigator Derek Shun, a B-rank Divine Class Officer, who calmly questioned why it took so long to answer and announced they were searching the building after reports of a wanted fugitive sighting, showing a photo as Elias's father laughed it off, claiming the criminal's face was plastered all over the city and he'd report him instantly obscene. While behind him, Elias Spy stood bloodied beside his mother, only for Gavin's sharp eyes to lock onto Elias Spy and question what had happened to the kid, prompting Elias Spy's father to casually lie that the boy was clumsy and fell while running errands, brushing it off like it wasn't worth official attention. But Elias, by wiping blood from his mother's hands, finally spoke up and said no, declaring clearly that his father was the one who did this to him, causing the room to freeze as his father slowly turned around, fury exploding across his face, realizing that everything was about to spiral completely out of control. Now rewind 18 minutes earlier downstairs where Elias Spy had casually weaponized a landline like a gigachad and anonymously reported spotting someone who looked exactly like Snow. The wanted psycho plastered all over city screens, entering Building A of Violet Estate. And in the present, he calmly thought about how he'd made the call from shop across the street before heading upstairs, knowing the inspection squads had already swept the floor and that the moment Snow's name popped up, the Divine inspection teams would move like they'd been caffeinated for 3 days straight, which they did way faster than expected, but still slow enough to buy him precious time. And now back in the apartment, the deputy captain questioned Elias B's father about whether the accusations were true, only for the man to laugh it off and claim Elias B was joking because he'd never hurt his own son, which is exactly when Elias B went full courtroom mode and calmly listed his injuries, stool trauma, bottle wand, fist damage, pointing them out like receipts and explaining that every single one could be documented as evidence right now, while quoting Divine Code Awakener. Management Regulations Chapter 8, Article 4, like a law student on Red Bull, stating that any awakener posing immediate danger must be arrested with an automatic 15-day lockup, which visibly stunned the inspection team before Gavin Lee stepped forward, formally placing Elias Bai's father under arrest, prompting the man to explode in rage and threatened Elias Bai until Derek Chin shut him down hard, warning him that resisting would end badly. And as he was dragged away, screaming that he'd remember this, the door slammed shut and Elias Bai finally turned to his mother, who immediately hugged him as he reassured her it was over, internally realizing he'd changed history. This time, and bought himself 15 days to grow stronger, bunching his fist as he reflected that the beating wasn't a total loss because he'd swiped his father's safety right, a rare treasure obtained through betrayal that had once dragged that man from rock bottom to C rank. Then quietly unlocking the hidden vault his father had always kept secret, retrieving an A-rank Kunblade, and thinking how in his past life he'd only discovered this after the bastard died. Realizing dungeons were now his only real path forward since all public ones were guild-controlled, leaving only school-managed rifts and hidden dungeons he remembered from before, Elias Bai entered an undiscovered dungeon. Fully aware that dungeons were demon-infested death traps requiring coordinated teams, yet choosing to go solo anyway, because he had no other option, stepping into a freezing cloud-type environment where the cold bit deep. Instantly realizing something was wrong when a Bloodfawn wolf, a rank level 2, ambushed him at insane speed, forcing Elias Bai to dodge and jam the Kunga blade straight into its mouth before cleanly bisecting it, instantly killing the beast and confirming the weapon was cracked beyond belief with absurd stat boosts that patched his current power gap. Though he still grimaced at how weak he felt compared to his L-rank days, calculating that it would take slaughtering dozens of wolves just to level once, only to hear more growls echo through the frozen terrain as an entire pack emerged, led by a level 4 E-rank Bloodfawn Wolf King, causing Elias Bai to exhale sharply and think that getting dogpiled straight out the gate was insane luck. But as he tightened his grip on the blade, his eyes hardened because insane or not, this dungeon was now his grind zone, and he wasn't backing out. Elias Bai went absolutely feral the moment, the wolves L charging straight into them like rent was due, and landing critical hits left and right while dodging, countering, and in slicing so fast the Bloodfawn wolves didn't even realize they were dead until their HP bars emotionally disconnected from their bodies. And as the fight snowballed, Elias Bai moved like a blender on X2 speed, constantly gaining experience while thinking he just needed to clear a few more to secure the day until only the Bloodfawn Wolf King remained. At which point Elias Bai dashed in, unloaded a ridiculous number of slashes, and deleted the oversized dog instantly, looting a snow wolf diamond and casually thinking that at this pace he'd cruise straight into D rank, which was immediately confirmed when his experience crossed 1,000, and he leveled up, gaining 12 stat points. Though he quickly realized E-rank bodies were made of wet cardboard, making him wish for a dimensional bag since leaving loot behind felt like a personal insult. Especially when he picked up the snow wolf diamond worth around 10 grand, and thought about how solo grinding was an absolute nightmare compared to guild teams, which dragged his thoughts back to the brutal reality that if he wanted access to high-ranking dungeons, he'd eventually need to join the God Guild. Since the Awakener Academy was basically a talent conveyor belt feeding the guild, and getting kicked out meant being hard-stuck forever. Exactly what happened to his father when suddenly more wolves showed up and Elias Spy pivoted into big brain mode, sprinting away and slashing trees to block their path only to stop cold when even the wolves froze up because a cloud python slithered in. Followed by several more boxing Elias baying from all sides before a massive explosion shook the dungeon and a Tundra Bear level 8. Rank Cloud Demon Beast crashed and like an angry DLC boss immediately going berserk and attacking literally everything, which made Elias Spy grin internally. Because when a Tundra Bear rages, it doesn't discriminate, letting him steal kills left and right while slicing through wolves pythons and anything unlucky enough to wander into range, racking up experience like a psychopath while thinking E-rank beasts were savage but dumb as bricks, leveling up to E-rank 4, and noting the bear was basically carrying half the grind, though he reminded himself he still needed last hits for full rewards until the battlefield got overcrowded again with wolves behind him and snakes in front, forcing Elias Spy to escalate as he tightened his grip on the blade, exhaled, and slammed his sword in the ground just as every monster charged, casually detonating the terrain because he'd been mapping the battlefield the whole time and realized this wasn't solid ground, but an ice bridge stretched between canyon cliffs, causing it to collapse and send most of the monsters plummeting to their death, giving him massive experience and jumping him straight to E-rank 7 along with 2 more snow wolf diamonds. After which he figured cleanup would be easy with what stamina he had left until the Tundra Bear stepped forward again and Elias Spy suddenly unlocked the Title 1 versus 100, granting a 10% stat boost when outnumbered. Though something felt off because every dungeon had a boss. And after all that chaos, nothing had shown up yet, which was when an icy spell slammed down, freezing the barren wolves instantly, forcing Elias Spy to dodge, and finally realized he'd had it backward all along. Because the boss wasn't sleeping, it had been waiting patiently for everyone to exhaust themselves and cluster together. And as another spell froze Elias by his leg and then crawled up his body, he understood the ice bridge was bait from the start. And right on cue, the Dungeon Lord revealed itself. A level 11 D-rank Cloud Sorcerer Dungeon Lord. Darkwood Lord flanked by a level 10 E-rank Vice Commander and 2 Darkwood apes smiling as the dungeon's true name finally appeared in Elias B's vision. Frost Peak, an E-rank special dungeon with an intelligent lord and an extreme threat level, leaving Elias B half frozen cornered and realizing the real fight had only just begun. Elias B found himself frozen solid along with every leftover mob that wasn't part of the boss's inner circle. And as the cold gnawed at his body like unpaid rent, he thought that at this rate, he'd lose all his body heat before the fight even properly restarted. While the Darkwood Lord casually pointed at him and laughed like a smug raid boss streamer, ordering his 2 minion apes to rush him, which forced Elias Spy to realize there was only one way out. So the instant the apes attacked, he force-burned everything he had, shattered the ice, restraining him, and countered so fast the boss didn't even process it, instantly killing one ape with a perfectly timed parry that made the Darkwood Lord visibly freeze in shock. While Elias B internally screamed that breaking control effects like this was murdering his stamina bar. But he had no choice because if the sorcerer got time to charge another high-tier spell, it was game over. And sure enough, the boss only smiled and clenched his fist, freeing the trapped Tundra Bear and sending it barreling toward Elias Spy in a calm but deadly rage, making Elias Spy think bitterly that nuclear types already got hard countered by cloud types. And with his stamina basically in the negatives, even just the 2 apes alone would have been suicide, let alone a Tundra Bear, wolves, and a spell-spamming dungeon lord all stacked like a cursed party comp, forcing him to fight while retreating as another ape lunged. And the bear charged, his body screaming from the cold and exhaustion, while the sorcerer dropped blizzard bombardment, raining massive ice chunks from above. And in that chaos, Elias B's mind snapped into survival mode, remembering how in his previous life, he'd been thrown into death grinders so often that every near-death experience sharpened his instincts for finding that one million escape. Realizing he only had 2 options left, either dig in and keep swinging until he died trading blows, which had a 0% survival rate, or go for option 2, which was pure madness. Because as he dashed backward and jumped off the cliff, the ice chased him midair and froze his leg again, dragging him down as he fell. But just as the boss and monsters thought he'd misplayed into suicide, the frozen ice started cracking during the fall, shocking even the dungeon lord. And as Elias plummeted toward the bottom, about to smash into the abyss, the scene abruptly cut to his home, where his mother knocked on his bedroom door. Annoyed that he slept till noon every weekend, only to find the bed empty and a note saying he was hanging out at a friend's place in Woodville and would be late, which instantly felt wrong to her, because Elias B. would never leave a note like that, making her uneasy as she wondered why he felt like a completely different person since yesterday. While back in the dungeon, Elias burst out of a freezing river at the bottom of the cliff, gasping for air and clutching an ice rock as he confirmed his gamble had paid off. When the ice bridge collapsed, nearly 100 monsters fell. But only about 60 actually died, meaning the rest survived, and the river had always been his only lifeline. Yet, as he dragged himself onto the shore, panting violently, system warnings flooded in, announcing hypothermia, severe damage, and critical weakness, making Elias bitterly think that the fall alone had nearly shattered his body. And as his vision blurred and his eyes finally shut, he wondered grimly if this was really where everything ended. As Elias lay there barely breathing, he genuinely wondered if this was it, if the grind finally cooked him for good. When a monster's low growl crept closer and he realized the thing looming near his broken body was a glacier overlord, and right as death vibes piqued his mind hard cut into memories like a tragic AMV. Or Ian yelling that he came back without inviting her for drinks. A porter begging him to explain incomprehensible data. His mother gently asking if his head still hurt, and then the darker one slammed in with his father looking down telling him to just die, and Sky finishing him off declaring his story over. Except something inside Elias snapped, because he realized he couldn't afford to have a limit. Not again. Not after dying once already. And rage, regret, and sheer refusal to lose exploded out of him as he forced himself upright, grabbed the glacier overlord's jaws with his bare hands, and pried them open like he was ripping apart destiny itself, screaming that he would never let history repeat again, that he had already lost everything once. And with a kick so violent it sent the overlord flying and shattered one of its fangs, Elias staggered back, panting, dagger in hand, just as a new surge of energy erupted from deep inside him. Because when you're staring death in the face, that's when advancement tries to trigger. And although his class advancement failed due to missing requirements, the system still handed him something cracked. A nuclear swordsman advanced skill, making Elias grin like a maniac as he realized he'd unlocked an ultimate early and surrounded by a tundra bear, blood fawn wolves, and the glacier overlord. He decided if the breakthrough wasn't coming yet, he'd just wipe the board anyway. Activating the skill Oblivion and unleashing a full 360-degree slash that turned the battlefield into a deleted scene, cleaving wolves, the bear, and the overlord clean in half with one absurd attack, instantly restoring his stamina and healing his wrecked body. As he hit E-Rank 8, unlocked the title Tundra Vanquisher with bonus resistance and damage against cloud types, and casually cleaned up the remaining monsters like they were tutorial mobs. Leveling to E-Rank enemies now felt like child's play. The cold barely registering anymore thanks to Oblivion storing all the punishment he'd taken and refunding it as a massive AoE nuke, leaving him fresh as hell. After which he started climbing out of the frozen canyon with a rock in hand, thinking he had no idea how long he'd been trapped in this icy nightmare and needed a bail before his mom completely lost it, worrying only to hear movement above and spot the dungeon boss himself calmly waiting with his 8 minions hanging behind him like unpaid interns. One eye opening as Elias climbed into view, prompting an immediate ambush and Elias to smirk and mutter, well, round 2. Casually noting that somewhere during the climb, he'd already capped rank level 10. Smooth as hell. While Elias was busy throwing hands with destiny itself back home, his mother was pacing like an anxious NPC on loop because it was already May 23rd. And in her head, she kept asking where on earth her son had vanished to, worrying that he'd been gone far too long and praying he was safe while still stubbornly cooking his meal like he'd walk in any second. And meanwhile, back in the dungeon, the Darkwood Lord finally reacted as Elias stood atop the Tundra Bear's corpse like a boss intro cutscene. The Dungeon Lord pointing and laughing like this was still funny, only for one of the Darkwood apes to leap in and immediately get countered and deleted by Elias netting him 70 experience and visibly rattling the boss who panic-cast Blizzard Bombardment and hurled a storm of ice crystals his way. Except this time, Elias didn't even flinch because his cloud resistance kicked in, and the ice attacks straight up tickled, letting him walk through them like a villain ignoring explosions, instantly closing the distance as the boss tried flashing away, sliced clean through the arm holding the staff, and turned the Darkwood Lord's face into pure horror as blood sprayed, and Elias by unloaded an absolute blender of slashes, finally killing the level 11 Dank Cloud Sorcerer Dungeon Lord and scoring a massive 1,000 experience that pushed him straight into D-rank Nuclear Warrior, boosting all his stats with a full multiplier and landing him at level 11 E rank with extra stat points, followed immediately by back-to-back notifications because his Cloud Elemental Absorption had maxed out and triggered a new class awakening, making Elias by realize he'd been fighting so non-stop he forgot this could even happen, unlocking a red tier E-rank Cloud Mage class that he could freely switch to. And even though it was only E-rank, that fat 200% stat multiplier meant its raw numbers were already matching his current D-rank warrior like a cheat code, topped off by dungeon loot, including a D-rank mage weapon and a dimensional pouch that could hold 20 items, causing the remaining apes to freeze in fear as Elias by casually flexed his red aura and announced he still had cleanup left, switching classes on the spot and gripping the staff to break in the new build. And by the time he finally staggered home at 5 a.m. on Saturday, May 24th, his exhausted mother was still waking up when the door creaked open, immediately hugging him like nothing else mattered. As Elias' spy apologized for making her worry, noticed she'd stayed up without eating, and softly asked her if she'd listened to something important he needed to say, because this time, he wasn't letting anything slip through his hands again, while students around him oscillated between hype and fear about real dungeon combat. And when training officially kicked off with gravity chamber cardio, and students bragged about sprint times, Elias Bly stepped forward last and told the instructor he wouldn't be using the gravity room at all, leaving the man staring at him in pure disbelief as he asked, "Alas, Bly?" The instructor scoffed and said he'd heard about Elias Bly's little weekend scuffle with Magnus, but warned him not to get cocky just because he dropped a red tear, asking who exactly he thought was allowed to skip training, instantly triggering the instructor's ego as he snapped back, asking whether Elias By was implying something was wrong with his methods, only for Elias By to respectfully but boldly explain that while cardio and gravity chambers were essential for most awakeners, shuttle runs mainly benefited speed-based classes like warriors and assassins, whereas mages and enchanters needed elemental control practice instead, pointing out that different stat builds and combat styles required different training focus, which made the whole class go dead silent, because bro really just said that out loud. And even Four Eyes whispered that calling out the most elite trainer in school in public was borderline suicidal. Yet to everyone's shock, the instructor laughed, clapped Elias By on the shoulder, and admitted the logic was solid, saying the problem wasn't the idea, but scale. Since customizing training for hundreds of students before a live future-defining combat simulation was nearly impossible, as teachers had to decide whether to choose students' paths or let them choose for themselves. And seeing the students watching anxiously, Elias By thought about how awful his home life was last time, but how solid mentors had kept him from going completely off the rails. So he looked the instructor straight in the eye and asked him to believe in him just for this final performance, prompting the instructor to agree and ask for the plan where Elias B requested the elemental negation chamber set to max stunning everyone. Because why would a nuclear warrior willingly train where elements were suppressed only for Elias B to explain he wanted to be more well-rounded and quietly train his weak points without exposing his real ace, since he absolutely couldn't announce he was leveling multiple classes under God level surveillance, and as training began and his body froze under elemental suppression, Elias kept his distance from classmates on purpose, knowing attachments slowed, put him down. While the class rep also joined elemental training, claiming mage specialization, and jokingly challenged Elias By to spar only to get turned down as he said he was flying solo, which somehow fired her up even more. And later after school, when the excited kid and Four Eyes chased him down, panting like exhausted NPCs, Elias initially assumed they were trouble until memories hit him that these two were his closest friends in his last life, fellow deadweight punching bags who shared the only good times he'd had back then. At this time, he coldly decided that revenge required moving forward alone, walking off as they muttered about how much he'd changed, though Elias By suddenly doubled back just to tell Four Eyes to get his lungs checked the first chance he got, confusing them before he hopped on his cycle and trash-talked them for being slow, while internally remembering that Four Eyes died young from lung disease in his last life, and silently hoping he'd at least survive this one. And as the boys argued whether Elias By was now a cold jerk or just different, the scene shifted elsewhere, where Kai casually chatted with a higher-up about a hotshot newbie tearing up records in the court guild. While that same night, Elias By reminded his mom not to go out alone anymore, promising to return earlier and buy groceries, thinking it still wasn't enough and that he needed a safer place for her soon. As the final cut jumped to a woken prison, where his father discreetly slipped cash to a guard whispering that he was trusting him, and the guard replied calmly that everything was set, and he'd be out tomorrow setting the stage for things to go very, very wrong. Eyes by calmly concluded he basically cracked the mage side of things because at the end of the day, it all boiled down to cast timing and clean elemental math while the excited kid was still grinding 10 shuttle sets like his life depended on it. And by Wednesday, Faraz was running while Elias silently watched them both until they invited him to dinner again. And he smoothly declined with his now standard got to head home early excuse, which the excited one called out as cap while Four Eyes just sighed because he was used to it now. Before Elias Spy casually dropped real advice, telling the excited kid his archer skills had too much wind up and needed cleaner start motions, which instantly got the guy fired up. And then Thursday after school at the clinic, Faraz finally got his lungs checked like Elias told him to, only for the doctor to confirm parasitic lung tumors that luckily got caught early, saying surgery would fix everything if done soon, but leaving Forey stunned as he realized that without Elias's warning, he'd never have known, wondering what on earth had changed about him. When gossip suddenly exploded on campus about Magnus cheating again and already hitting E-rank 4 thanks to private dungeon access through his family, with whispers that the same guy who embarrassed him last weekend was getting jumped off campus today, and that Magnus wasn't letting it slide, which made Four Eyes panic and sprint through the streets thinking Magnus would definitely play dirty or bring a whole crew only to freeze when he remembered he was just a green tier chanter with no combat skills, and that dodging trouble was usually his survival strategy. But then his conscience hit harder than fear as he remembered Elias had once saved his life, pushing him to break into the armory anyway and grab a weapon, because backing out now would be worse than dying, only to get caught by the class rep asking why he was freaking out and breaking rules. And when he blurted out that Elias was in danger, she immediately realized this wasn't a drill. While elsewhere, Elias casually biked through the streets, calling out for whoever had been tailing him since school to stop playing games, prompting Magnus to step out and announce this was payback time, charging in with a backstep assassination skill to appear behind him, only for Elias to instantly counter-shatter Magnus' weapon and calmly asked if he really thought he was the only one getting stronger before grabbing Magnus by the neck and slamming his blade in the ground right beside his head, making it finally click for Magnus that the boy standing over him wasn't just a head anymore. He was someone Magnus would never ever catch up to. Magnus finally snapped and unloaded all his frustration, screaming how Elias had leveled up to, demanding to know how fast, how, and why. Losing his mind because he'd trained nonstop at school and at home just to barely hit level 4. Ranting that there was no way Alias Spy should be faster than him, only for Alias Spy to calmly yank his dagger out of the ground and press it against Magnus' neck, asking in the most unhinged yet calm tone imaginable whether Magnus had ever actually died before, which instantly shut him up. Though Magnus scoffed and said if Elias Spy wanted him gone, he should just do it already, gripping his weapon and claiming Elias Spy had always wanted him dead anyway. But Elias surprised him by saying no and not enough to kill him, pointing out that Magnus had followed him alone instead of jumping him with a crew, because deep down he just wanted to see how he stacked up, which made Magnus explode again and threatened to come back and finish him if Elias didn't do it now, prompting Elias to sigh and admit Magnus really was that annoying. While nearby Faraz and the class reps secretly watched the whole thing and realized they didn't need to interfere because Magnus was already mentally cooked. And that's when Elias Spy casually dropped the bomb by telling Magnus he'd been expecting him and proposing a deal. He'd tell Magnus how to level faster in exchange for something later. Cutting straight to Friday, when training week ended and the instructor announced the combat simulation. Everyone that despite being a simulation, they'd be running real dungeons sealed by barriers but still packed with demon beasts with upperclassmen assigned as emergency support only teams of 4 or 5 and a choice between Frank or E-rank dungeons, stressing that anyone not ready should back out or lose credits, prompting the class rep and Magnus to confidently raise their hands for E-rank. While the excited kid whispered they had guts and joked he'd choose it too if he wasn't green tier until the instructor revealed only 8 out of 180 students picked rank, and then noticed Elias hadn't chosen anything, which is when Elias raised his hand and casually announced he wanted to run the school's D-rank Spirit Rift dungeon, instantly detonating the room as Four Eyes yelled what the heck, and the instructor flat out rejected it with the dean warning D-rank dungeons were insanely dangerous and required high school level D-rank minimums, only for Elias to counter by quoting the handbook book and combat simulation rules, arguing that the entire point was scouting talent for the Gods Guild and talent included guts, power, and accountability, directly asking if they were really going to deny him the chance to prove himself, then dropping the mic further by saying he'd solo it, which violated every safety policy ever written until the class rep suddenly raised her hand and declared she'd run dank too, shocking the dean, who panicked about explaining that to her father, while she calmly said she wanted top marks and to see her limits. Only for Elias Spy to reject teaming up again until the dean finally gave in with visible irritation and warned both of them not to get cocky. The instructor sarcastically wishing them luck, finding an upperclassman crazy enough to supervise what was basically a suicide mission, when suddenly an upperclassman named Julian raised his hand and volunteered, while Alias internally shrugged because he'd never heard of the guy. Julian sizing Elias by up, thinking this freshman didn't even know what league he was in. And with that, the instructor finalized the teams, announced that live stream drones would record everything live, told everyone to bring their game, and officially kicked off the combat simulation, setting the stage for a public throne that would decide who really ruled this. The Awaken Academy was built atop a conquered Great Demon Cave. Both the high school and middle school divisions occupied its grounds. The main cave had spawned many smaller subsidiary caves around it, perfect for student trials. Most were controlled, their threats rated between F and D rank. Entering one of these dungeons marked the start of a simulated combat exercise. The entire trial was live-streamed. Every action would be recorded and judged. As Elias stepped into the dimly lit cavern alongside Scarlet and their assigned senior guide, a single thought anchored his focus. That means I have to be careful not to reveal all my trump cards. This Link Demon Cave, it has what I want. A senior strode ahead, his voice echoing with practiced reassurance. Don't worry, I'll protect you both. I've even cleared an unsealed C-rank demon cave with a team before. Scarlet trailed slightly behind, her eyes scanning the damp, rune-carved walls. Just how strong are the monsters in a D-rank cave? The senior answered without turning. Generally, they range between E5 and D5, around level 5 to 15. The truly strong monsters in the school's caves are sealed. Different beast types almost never appear, let alone a boss. He paused, puffing out his chest slightly. Still, don't underestimate high-level E-rank monsters. Sometimes their attack power and speed can be overwhelming. After all, you've only just awakened. To them, asking questions are bad. He flashed a confident grin over his shoulder. I'll try to find some weaker mobs for you to farm for credits. Relax. Your senior is here. I won't let a junior like you get hurt. But while he was talking, Elias B had already walked past him, moving deeper into the tunnel with purposeful silent steps. The senior's smile faltered. Hey, if you rush that far ahead, you could startle the monsters. Elias B didn't break stride. You talk too much, he said, his voice flat and final. The senior stiffened, a tremor of anger in his reply. What? Scarlet watched, wide-eyed and nervous. They were being observed. Through a bank of camera screens, the live stream was broadcast to the entire student body. This year's simulated combat had begun. In a monitoring room elsewhere on the Ultimate Campus, several officials and elite students watched the feeds. A boy with sharp eyes and an air of casual authority, the vice captain of the campus elite corps, leaned forward, a smirk playing on his lips. Captain, take a look at this stream, he said, pointing. It's going to be fun. One of the juniors picked a D-ranked dungeon. The captain, a girl with an impassive demeanor, didn't look up from her paperwork. Oh, what class? That's the funniest part, the vice captain chuckled. He's just the most worthless green warrior type. The captain's pen stilled. She finally glanced at the screen where Elias Spy's figure moved steadily into the gloom. A green warrior in a D-rank cave by choice. Her days grew calculating. I want to see where his confidence comes from. Back in the cave, the senior scouted Elias B's retreating back. His earlier bravado now tinged with irritation. Elias B's last command hung in the stale air. Don't need your help. The senior trembled, not from fear, but from pure, affronted pride. This was not how this was supposed to go. Scarlet gripped the strap of her bag, her knuckles white. The only sound was the drip of distant water and the low hum of the magical cameras floating in the shadows, broadcasting their every tense moment to the watching academy. In another simpler dungeon, a boy named Four Eyes was panicking. Don't come over here, he shouted, his voice cracking as he frantically rang his support class instrument. He was inside a sealed F-class labyrinth. A senior beside him sighed, trying to sound patient. You're just a chanter. Can't ask to be back. You're supposed to stay in the back and give us buffs. But Four Eyes was nervous, terrified, because he saw not one, but two monsters skulking in the gloom ahead. A flame bat and a violent cat. WY is an F-class labyrinth so scary? He stammered. His eyes then widened further as he spotted more shapes moving. A vicious Fong, a star ferret, and others slinking from side tunnels. Everyone in his group froze, shocked by the sudden crowd of low-level beasts. Meanwhile, inside a sealed E-class labyrinth, the atmosphere was tense. A healer knelt beside a wounded boy, her hands glowing with soft light. Are you okay, Justin? Another boy, his expression grim, stepped forward. If you guys can't do it, Then let me handle it alone. He clenched his fists and power surged around him. The distinct aura of a Magnus. His thoughts burned with a single focus. I will definitely absolutely surpass you, Elias Spy. He moved instantly, a blur of motion. A spectral tiger materialized beside him and pounced, its claws slicing through one of the charging monsters with brutal efficiency. Back in the sealed, deranked labyrinth, Elias Spy was a study in calm devastation. He moved through the monsters like a scythe through wheat. The corpse of a rage bear, a solid E-class monster, lay at his feet, one of many he'd already dispatched. Scarlet stared, her earlier fear replaced by awe. How'd you do that? The senior beside her was equally shocked, his mouth slightly agape. But then a skittering sound echoed. New monsters appeared from crevices in the wall. Large multi-legged shapes with too many eyes. Spider lurkers. Elias Spy didn't even turn. The monsters here are all sealed and can only use half their strength. He explained, his voice level. So they aren't that hard to deal with. Scarlet's eyes sparkled with excitement. Even at half strength, you're still taking on multiple enemies at once. That looks like I'm still a long way from catching up to you. Elias Spy finally glanced at her. There's no need to compare yourself to others. Just focus on being yourself. She puffed her cheeks slightly. Hey, do you always have to talk so coolly? Fine, I'll do my best. The senior, however, was stewing in frustration. You hogged all the damn spotlight. He cleared his throat, forcing authority into his voice. This is a D-class dungeon. You'd better not be so confident. Be careful. He straightened, tried to regain his mentor role. Your performance is indeed commendable, but it's your first time in a labyrinth. Plus, this is a 3-chamber labyrinth, which isn't so easy to handle. As your senior, I should still give you some advice. Scarlet, Elias Spy interrupted, completely ignoring him. You take care of the monsters coming from the right. I will take the left. The senior's eye twitched. Ignoring me again, they moved. Elias Spy was a whirlwind of precise strikes, and Scarlet, though less fluid, held her own, her determination hardening with each blocked attack. They cleared the chamber efficiently while the senior trailed behind, seething, ignoring me, treating me like baggage. As the last of the skittering sounds faded, Elias Spy paused. The monsters on the right are lower level. Can you handle the next wave by yourself? Scarlet blinked. By myself? The senior's anger boiled over internally. This brat. He has no respect for his seniors at all. But Elias Spy continued, his logic impeccable. This combat simulation is a test of each person's individual ability. You came here to be assessed, after all. Don't you want a good score? Scarlet took a deep breath, resolve firming in her gaze. Understood. I can do it. Elias Spy gave a slight nod and moved forward, his attention already on the shadows of the next passage where deeper growls rumbled. The senior watched them split, his pride wounded and his authority utterly dismissed. His face darkened. Dan, looks like you'd rather do this the hard way. Silently, he summoned his weapon, the metal glinting coldly in the dungeon's dim light. A plan born of spite began to form in his mind. Watching Elias Spy's fight on the monitor screens, the observing students buzzed with surprise. This is incredible. Elias Spy has taken care of so many E-class monsters already. What level is he now? Even their instructor was shocked, his earlier skepticism crumbling. One student scrutinized a data tablet. His report still says E-class level 1. So it's not clear, but judging by his mana output and combat speed, E3 or maybe even E4. And that's not all. Another pointed out, leaning forward, just now he chose the monsters on the left for himself and sent Scarlet to the right. That's because he observed the elemental counter relationship and had the Flora element user Scarlet deal with the Astro element monsters. Even though he knows this is a test of individual ability, he still made the most logical assignment. It seems he has great tactical awareness. The instructor stared at the screen. Elias Spy's calm figure moving with lethal grace. He remembered the boy's words before the trial, delivered with quiet certainty. Teacher, trust me, I won't let you down in this graduation performance. A slow nod of understanding came over the instructor. So the kid wasn't just bragging. His voice was a low murmur. What will he do next? In the dungeon, Elias Spy fought with a detached efficiency. His thoughts were clear, analytical. I noticed earlier that the Astro Element beasts have basically all been coming from the right-hand cave. Not only are they lower level, but they're also countered by her Flora element. As if on cue, he monitored Scarlet's fight from his periphery. A beast lunged at her from behind. Instantly, she whirled, her hands flying up. Vine wall. Countless thick vines erupted from the stone floor, weaving into a dense barrier. Thorns grappled the monster, holding it fast. Without hesitation, she shouted again. Mana flaring around her. Poison bloom. A sickly purple haze emanated from vines. The monster writhed, its shrieks muffled by the vegetation. Scarlet clenched her fist. Constrict. The vines tightened violently, then jerked inwards. A terrible cracking sound echoed, and the monster shattered into dissolving fragments. The system notification was silent to them, but the result was clear. She had successfully killed a star roach. Level 6. Scarlet breathed heavily, a flush of triumph on her face. I did it again. When mages are at E-class, they possess a basic class skill unique to their profession. Elias B. cataloged her skill is to use plants to create a poisonous trap. Vine wall rapidly grows vines into a wall. The thorns carry a certain poison effect. A flicker of respect crossed his mind. But for her first time in a labyrinth, to be able to calmly face monsters of a higher level by herself, and to even think of using the vines to surround them and shrink the area to kill them, she really does have certain talent. He dispatched the last monster in his sector and stood before the shimmering magical seal that marked the entrance to the next chamber. She can handle the ones in front of her. The D-class monster should be all sealed. His gaze lifted, subtly scanning the floating orb-like broadcast camera. At this rate, even in front of the live broadcast and pros, I can hide my true strength and still get a high score. But I also have to consider the live broadcast equipment followed us in. How should I proceed with the next step of my plan? While he was calculating, the senior's thoughts curdled into resentment nearby. You think you're pretty capable, don't you, to completely ignore me, your senior? Since you too can handle everything yourselves? His eyes narrowed. A shimmering bow of light materialized in his hand. He knocked an arrow that glowed with disruptive energy. Then try this, he drew and released. The arrow of light shot not at a monster, but straight past Elias by from behind Scarlet, aimed to strike the ground near her feet. A warning shot meant to startle, to disrupt her focus and prove his necessary presence. The senior called out, his voice laced with false concern. I was originally trying to give you a buff. Why did you dodge it? Scarlet flinched, fused. I didn't. But before she could finish her protest, a thunderous roar erupted from the cave entrance behind her, agitated by the sudden surge of light magic. A massive shape burst from the darkness, moving with terrifying speed. It was a double-headed stone lion. Level 11, a solid D-class threat. Its end were open, dripping with rocky saliva, and it was charging directly at Scarlet's unprotected bun. Elias Spy saw the lion bearing down on Scarlet. She had already thrown up her vine wall in a panic, but the déclassé monster tore through the barrier as if it were paper. It roared, the sound shaking the cavern, and lunged straight for her. We're done for, she thought, her blood running cold. A flash of satisfaction crossed the senior's face, hidden behind a mask of feigned alarm. But Elias's body moved before his thoughts could fully form. Swiftness, a surge of energy jolted through his limbs. The skill temporarily increased his speed by 50%, the effect scaling with his reaction time and proficiency. He became a blur, crossing the distance in an instant. He launched himself just above the lion, bringing his sword down in a fierce slash. Clang! One of the lion's heads twisted, its stone-like mane deflecting the blow. The other head, unimpeded, snapped viciously at Scarlet's retreating form. At flash blink, the air crackled. When his swiftness proficiency peaked, Elias By could trigger this instantaneous flash effect, phasing through obstacles. He reappeared directly in front of the attacking maw, his weapon intercepting the bite with a shower of spark. He managed to score a deep gash across its stone snout. Wow, how is this monster so fast? He thought, muscle straining as he pushed back, his sword point held steady against the monster's raw strength. The senior watched, a smug thought threading through his mind. Yeah, I know this dungeon very well. Although most D-class monsters are sealed, this one overlooked double-headed stone lion in the cave entrance will continuously respawn. No matter how cocky you are, you're still just newly awakened recruits. How will you fare against a D-class monster, especially one that's been enhanced by my skill, unseen by the others? The faint fading glow of his earlier arrow of light still clung to the lion's hide. It wasn't a buff for allies. It was a status interference for monsters. Gravity reduction 10x. Damage and speed significantly increased. The fastest double-headed lion. Now it's berserk. Attack plus 10. Speed plus 50. Elias By felt the overwhelming pressure. Damn it. Do I have to use my full strength? He shoved the beast back a step and barked at Christine. Fall back. You can't handle this monster right now. His own heart hammered against his ribs. I was actually scared for a moment. But as the lion recoiled and gathered itself for another charge, Christine didn't retreat. Her face was pale, but set with determination. "And Vine Wall," she shouted. A wall of thorns erupted, stalling the lion's advance again. A second layer sprang up, then a third, creating a thick, tangled cage that momentarily trapped the roaring beast. Even Elias By was surprised by her speed and resolve. Breathing hard, Christine met his gaze. Can you let me join? I won't hold you back. Even if it is a class, I want to help you fight. Inside the semi-transparent prison of vines, the lion raged, cracking the vegetation with each thrash. The senior was utterly amazed. Is this chick out her mind? She was almost eaten by the lion in one bite, just now. Elias studied her for a split second. The fear in her eyes had been burned away by a fierce, stubborn light. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched his lips. I thought you had been scared senseless. You recovered pretty quickly. And she tightened her grip on her mana, vines responding to her will. Of course, I've worked so hard. I can't be defeated in a place like this. The lion gave a final, thunderous roar, shattering the last of the vines. Stone dust and splinters filled the air, but now it faced not one startled junior, but two, standing side by side, weapons ready, resolve mirrored in their stance. They were ready to fight. Scarlet met Elias Spy's assessing gaze, her voice firm despite the adrenaline. Besides, with you here, I know I won't die. Elias Spy's response was pragmatic, focused on the battle. You just used 3 layers of skill at once. Your elemental power is limited, so you can't waste any more of it. I know that, she replied, already calculating her remaining mana. A brief memory flashed in Elias Spy's mind. The Scarlet of my past life was already shining brightly in middle school, optimistic, confident, and generous. A young lady from a powerful family background who was kind to everyone. She became the class president, always serious and responsible. I lost track of her after that. Perhaps she went on to live an ordinary, peaceful life. His eyes refocused on her, standing resolute against the roaring lion. But for now, she is someone I can trust. As long as no other accidents happen, I should be able to pass this test while hiding my true strength, watching their coordinated stand. The senior's lips curled in a sneer. Do you really think the two of you are enough? That vine wall won't hold it for more than a few seconds. Real combat isn't won on confidence alone. With your level of strength, there is no way you can deal with this enhanced D-class beast. He crossed his arms, waiting. When you are finally begging for your lives and have no choice but to ask me for help, I will teach you what it means to respect your elders. As if on cue, the lion gave a final savage heave. The constricting vine snapped. It broke free instantly, its dual head swiving with renewed fury. Elias Spy moved without hesitation. I'll lead it and target its elemental core. You need to know the right time to act. The lion lunged. They dodged in a split-second unison, jumping to opposite sides of the cavern. Elias Spy's mind raced. I damaged it just now, so it's prioritizing me as a target. He turned and sprinted, not away from the monster, but toward the shimmering shallow underground pool at the chamber's edge. The lion roared and gave chase, its enhanced speed making it a blur of stone and rage. Elias Spy hit the water, his swiftness skill leaving a trail of ripples. The lion plunged in after him, the water churning violently. Now Elias Spy's shout echoed off the wet stones. From the bank, Scarlet's hand shot forward. Vine beamed, thick rope of vines erupted from the mossy cavern floor, not to cage but to ensnare. They whipped through the air, wrapping around the lion's hind legs and torso the moment it was most burdened by the water. With a grunt of effort, Scarlet willed the vines to pull. The massive beast was hauled, roaring and thrashing out of the pool and onto the stone, completely entangled. The lion writhed, trying to summon its berserk strength, but Scarlet wasn't done. Her eyes glowed faintly with emerald light. Constrict poison bloom. The vines tightened with crushing force. A sickly purple miasma seeped from the thorns directly into the beast's stony hide. The enraged roar turned into a choked gurgle as the berserk effect sputtered and died. Disabled by the overwhelming venom and pressure, its movements grew sluggish, paralyzed by the toxin. Elias Spy emerged from the water, dripping but composed. He approached the immobilized monster, his sword gleaming in the dungeon's phosphorescent light. It can't break free now. He glanced at Scarlet, a nod of clear approval passing between them. Now then, let's finish the test and get the highest score. He raised his blade, ready for the final strike. His plan back on trappy. The senior who had secretly buffed the lion and orchestrated the trap stared in disbelief. How is that possible? A single layer of vine bind trapped the lion. Even that couldn't have subdued it that easily, especially after I enhanced. His composure cracked. Son of a watching the fight from the monitoring room, the instructor let out a low, impressed breath. A Terra element land beast, when submerged in water, is unable to use its skills effectively. But in a damp environment, the abilities of the flora element are strengthened. Using the simplest elemental counters and teamwork, they easily subdued a monster of a higher level than themselves. He turned to the other teachers, a note of pride in his voice. It's on-the-spot reaction time, and leadership skills are also outstanding. It seems there is no doubt who will take first place in this simulation. A lady beside him nodded, adjusting her glasses. Only the final blow is left. All that's left is to finish off this lion. When the entire recording is submitted to the guild for review, he will likely receive the highest score in our academy's history. But suddenly, the screen flickered. The live feed.